So today we are going to discuss the question of LeetCode, daily question of LeetCode of 12th June, and this question is sort colors. Given an array nums with n objects colored red, white, or blue, sort them in place so that objects with same color are adjacent with the colors in the order red, white, and blue. Right? We will use integers 0, 1, and 2 to represent the colors red, white, and blue respectively. Right? So question is telling us that. Uh, I'll explain the question, and also we should solve this question without using the sort function, or it would be just one liner question. We would write the sort function and it would be solved as it is. But what the question says, I'll explain it. So what this question says is, we are just given an array nums with some integers in it. We have nums here, right? And we have some colors in it, that is red, blue, and I guess white, right? And right, red, white, and blue. Anyways, so we will represent red by 0 and white by 1 and blue by 2 in the nums array. So nums array would consist of some zeros, some ones, and some twos, right? It would look something like this. Now what we have to do is sort this nums. We have to sort this nums, right, in place. In place basically means we don't have to initialize another array. We don't have to make another array. We have to do the sorting in nums itself. Now, and what the problem says, it can be done using multiple ways, like nums dot length, or nums has a length of, or we have given constraint of only n equal to 300, right? So we have only 300 constraint. So basically 300 square is 90000, and this would basically be 9 into 10 to the power 4, right? So this is almost 10 to the power 5, and this would pass in O of n square. So you can use bubble sort or any other sorting algorithm, bubble sort, or let's say selection sort, or insertion sort, etc, etc. You can use these methods, but I have a method which would work in O of n, right? This would work in O of n. The big hint to this question is that we have three colors here, right? Red, blue, and white. So I know that my value inside nums would be either 0, 1, or 2, right? We don't have any other choice except these three. So my intuition helps up against, if I have the count of these three, I can have a count of these three using only three variables. So that would be in constant space, right? I would store my count of red in int red. Whenever I encounter a 0, I would increment my red. Whenever I encounter a 1, I would increment my white count. And whenever I encounter a 2 in my array, I would increment my blue count. What I'm essentially doing, I'll just show you by example. Right, we have this example right here. So we have this example. So what I'll do is start from here, and here are my counters: red, white, and blue. So if I have a 2, I would increment my blue counter, that would be initialized to 0, 0, and it would become, when my I is equal to 0, my blue would be 1 incremented, and then my I would get shifted again and again. So when my nums of I is 0, then I would increment my red count. This would get added, and we'll shift this. If when it goes to next 2, I would increment my blue count again, and it would get shifted again, and you get the idea, right? It would get 1. Red is basically 0, white is 1, and blue is 2. We are just counting it, right? So finally we have 2 blues, 2 reds, and 2 whites. So final count will look like this. So what we would do now is just till we would just make assign our nums the values, like till my count of red becomes 0, I would I would just place the value as 0, nums of 0 equal to 0, nums of 1 equal to 0, whereas I'll do r minus minus, r minus minus here, and when my r is equal to 0 now, I would switch to my white one, and I would do the same for white, right? So my white was equal to 2, and so my nums of 2 equal to 1, right? So I would explain this clearly, wait. So let's initialize an array of count, and we have this values as 0, 1, 2, which is red, white, and I'll just take the same color, red, white, and blue, right? So our count for this input would look something like this. It would be 2, 2, and 2, right? So what we would do for nums, let's say this is j pointer, while my count of j is not 0, I would make nums of I is equal to j, right? And if this becomes 0, and I will increment I, and whenever this count of j becomes 0, I would increment the j, right? So this is the whole idea behind the code. Just make a count array and just traverse through the nums and put the value of nums as j and increment the I, and whenever my count of j becomes 0, I'll just increment my j, right? This is the overall idea of the question. Now without wasting our time, I think the things would become more clearer when we see the code. Let's see the code. Make a count array, int count, and of size 3. Basically the first element would represent the red element, red color, second would represent white, and third would represent blue. So right, and I would just initialize it to the count in which nums element are occurring, storing the count of nums array. So what I'm doing is just storing the count now, count plus plus. This would basically store the count of elements of nums, right? So now what we'll do is have an pointer j, and we would traverse the array again. The first traversal was to basically have my count array initialized, and this second for loop would be basically for in place replacement of the elements, right? So it would be I less than nums dot size and I plus plus. Now what I'll do here is while my count of j is less than or equal to 0, it would be equal to 0, let's say, then I'll just increment my j. So I'm doing this check because I don't want to encounter an element whose count is 0, right? Or it should not be less than 0, of course, but it should not be 0 either. So I'm having this check so that I would get a suitable value of j. And if my, so what I'll do next is just making nums of I is equal to j, and count of j minus minus. So basically I'm initializing my nums to j, and count of j would get decremented. So I think this would do it, and we don't have to return anything, so let's just try our code. So this got accepted, let's just submit it. Yeah, so of course this would have a very good time complexity because our code basically runs in O of n, right? We are not having any inner for loops, and this while loop is maximum times it would, for worst case scenario, worst case also, it would run for at max 3 times, right? Also we are having O of 1 time complexity and O of 1 space. As we are having O of 1 space complexity, we are having O of 1 space because we are just using an count array of just size 3, and O of size 3 is basically O of 1. This just takes O of 1 space, constant space every time. It does not depend on the input size of our nums, right? It does not depend on the input size of nums. That's why it is a constant space operation. So that's it. Thank you for watching, and bye.